Hey there. Alright, so this is our first crack at doing a video demo. I'll upload, or I will have already uploaded this if you're watching it. We're going to talk about edge banding today. It's going to be an interesting rest of the semester because who knows how this semester is going to play out. Are we going to get in the lab? Are we going to do everything online? Not really sure. So we're just going to play the hand that we're dealt and just kind of deal with this. First off, I hope that you and everyone's family is staying safe and staying healthy. That's the most important thing, but you know, we do have to keep on keeping on. So today we are going to talk about edge banding. I know it's a fascinating topic for you. It's a real page turner, let me tell you. But there are a couple of different things that you need to know about edge banding. You have your PVC edge banding, which would be just a plastic edge banding. You have your iron-on banding, which is wood banding, or it can be PVC as well. And that's got glue on it. And then you have your peel and stick, which is simply PVC or wood with a tape back. Take the tape off, you can put it on. That whining noise you hear in the background is the edge bander that I have, and we are going to use that one first, and that is a Festool edge bander. So that means one thing, it's expensive, but it's a good product. I'll give you a quick tour of my shop here. That's so you have an idea of what's happening. Okay, let me turn this thing around. Okay, I have a vertical panel saw. I got a big old sheet of plywood for my next job, a bloom hinging and line boring machine, a drill press. Hopefully I'm not moving too fast to make you all sick. And then I've got a woodpecker's router table and router lift. And that's got the Incra fence, or the super fence. When we do a raised panel demo, you'll see how that works. I've got my old jet table saw, a dust collector. You can see the planer behind some scrap wood there. I use that from time to time. I've also got a long joiner. I've got a wide joiner. I've got an 8-inch joiner. As you can see, it's kind of buried. I don't use that very often at all, but it is there in case I need it. I've got a chop saw with two wings. The one wing is down, with the scaled fence with the stops on it. And then I've got my edge bander. And everything else you see in the shop is pretty much mobile tools that I take for installations. Okay, so the first thing, that whining noise you hear, is the edge bander. We have the Festool Conturo edge banding system. I also have the table that it sits in. All told, this is probably about $3 grand for this setup. It works really well for me. You've got the digital readout. Looks like it's ready to go. It's at it's at 190 degrees, so it's ready to go. I've got some scrap plywood over here that I'm going to use, and then I have my actual edge banding. Now I like to use the 1 mil edge banding as opposed to 0.5. So this is a little bit thicker than you might see on some of the shelves. It's definitely thicker than this, which is 0.5 mil. It's half a millimeter. And the same thing with the peel and stick, which is 0.5 millimeter. Peel and stick I like to use in small applications, but if I can, I'll use the 1 mil, and I'll use the Conturo edge bander, which shoots glue onto the surface of the tape and then rolls the piece through. The nice thing about the Conturo is I can take it out and do a curved surface as well. Now, as you can see, I have a long roll of white edge banding. I don't need that much for the small scrap piece that we're doing, and I'll just take a pair of scissors and snip it off. Put that there. That's a little too short. I like to have about an extra inch on each side that I can trim off later. So now we'll come over here and I'll feed the banding in, and this is interesting with one hand, but it is what it is. Let's try it one more time. Alright. Now once I hit the go button, it's going to start feeding the tape. And I just push it against it, and it comes off. Alright, I actually had about 2 inches left on each side there. I'm going to turn the edge bander off so we get rid of that noise. So it's a little quieter in here now. But you can see I put my edge banding on, and it's hot glue, so I don't want to touch it. You can see it kind of dripping on the sides there. And I'm going to trim that off in just a minute. I'm going to let it cool first. And while we're waiting on it to cool, I'm going to show you the other edge banding. So bear with me while I put this back on the tripod. My camera crew wasn't able to make it today, so we just have to kind of roll with it and see what we got here. There we go. Alright, so that's the white PVC edge banding. We're going to trim that off in just a minute. Where do I get my PVC edge banding or my wood edge banding? I get it from Framatech. Edge Banding Specialists Incorporated also does it. It's ESI, but I buy it from Framatech. This roll here, I think this is probably 300 feet. This one is, I would get a roll per kitchen basically. And this would be good enough for, I think this would sell for about 50 bucks. The wood one is more like 100 depending on the species. It just depends. Okay, while we're waiting on this one to cool here, I've got this other piece and I'm going to use some peel and stick. So it's just as simple as that. I'm going to just kind of unwind this and I'm going to just measure a little bit over the side of each edge. And you'll see this is super complicated on how to do it. I don't know if you'll be able to figure it out. But it's exactly as advertised. You peel the paper off and you stick it on. So when I do this, I want to make sure that my piece is oversized and that it hangs over both edges and both ends. So I'll put one end on, and while I'm doing that, I'm pulling this tape tight on the other end. As I pull it tight, that allows me to keep any bubbles from forming and just kind of push it on there. Obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but the longer the piece is, the harder it is to get it lined up perfectly. Now, it is PSA adhesive, so that means it's pressure sensitive adhesive. So I got to push it a little bit harder and press on it to make sure that it's heating up the way it needs to. Or, excuse me, it's sticking the way it needs to. You can get a fancy roller and all sorts of other things, but I don't really think that's necessary. I think like your finger or maybe a block of wood would probably work just fine, but I don't even use the wood. I just use my fingers. All right. I'm going to turn the my super complicated exclusive woodworking tool, iron, and I'm going to set it for pretty much the hottest setting. So I set it for copper. Okay? So I got that there. I also have a heat gun. I like to use the heat gun when I make mistakes. Okay? If I make a mistake, I can heat up the I can pretty much heat up any of the edge banding and kind of peel it and redo it. But I don't like to use the heat gun when I'm applying the edge banding because the iron acts as adding pressure and heat at the same time, whereas this just adds heat and then I need something to roll in there. And if my fingers get underneath the heat gun, it's going to hurt because this thing gets hot fast. Another thing that you can use if you don't have a fancy heat gun or an exclusive edge banding tool such as an iron, you could use a hair dryer. That works just fine too. Okay? Alright, so now my glue is probably heated up enough. Or cooled off enough. I'm going to take my flush trim snips here. It's called Flush Cut, and they're from Fast Cap. Make sure you only use it for trimming edge banding. If you use this to trim nails or something like that, you're going to wreck your blades or your snips, and you're going to have to get another pair. So I'm going to trim off both ends first. I got my end there. And let me turn this camera down just a little bit more so you can maybe see it just a little better. There we go. That's a little better. Okay? Then I'm going to trim the other end off. And I'm holding it flush when I do that. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it holds up pretty good. Then I take my Fast Cap edge trimmers. What this is, it's two pieces. comes apart. There's two blades on it, top and bottom, front and back. Put them together. I'm going to squeeze it over my piece and then slide it to trim the sides. Now, on this piece, it's going to be much harder than it is on the peel and stick. Anybody tell me why? Of course, you can't answer for me, but I'm going to tell you. It's because this is 1 millimeter thick and that's half a millimeter. So it's going to take a little more effort. So I put it on there, I make sure the blades get on the material, and now I'm squeezing against the wood, I'm pressing against the wood, and I'm just going to press it across. And right at the end, it usually gets a little tough with the glue. And I can see that I missed a little bit here. You can see you get a nice piece, nice trim edge comes off. Put this back on, and I go the other way. Now, I've got a nice smooth surface. My nails can't catch on anything. And then I take another tool from FastCap, the edge brake, which is just a piece of sandpaper at a 90-degree corner, and I put it on here, and I break the edge. And that eliminates the sharpness of it and allows it to be a little smoother without losing the corner. Now I can feel as I'm flicking this that I'm catching a corner, so I'm going to trim it off again with my flush trim here. And I got a little bit off. There we go. And this side feels pretty good. I don't need to do anything. So this one is done. Takes a little bit more effort to use the 1 mil, but you'll see how much thicker it looks and how much nicer it looks. Now we have our peel and stick. I'm going to once again trim the edges, or trim the ends. After I peel the ends off, feel pretty good. I'm going to take this one through, and you'll probably notice that it goes a lot quicker, a lot easier. Okay? And I don't even have to go back over it. Corners came off good, everything came off good. Now, taking a look at that, you can see how much thicker the 1 mil is compared to the half mil. It's twice as thick. It adds a nicer dimension to it, I think. Is it absolutely necessary? No, but it's not that much more expensive to get another roll. It's probably, for the PVC, it's probably like 20 bucks more. And it just works nicer, I believe. In addition, if you're using wood banding, you can actually put a bigger round over in the thicker banding because you won't expose the plywood edge. So that's kind of nice. All right. Not to say that you're actually going to put a round over in it, but you might think about it. Now there's two other ways to attach edge banding. Well, there's multiple ways, but there's two other ways I'm going to show you. And one of them is with the iron on. Okay, this just happens to be oak. We'll snip this off, and you can use scissors to cut it at first. And then use the flush trims just to get it nice and tight at the ends. A nice piece there. Now, one thing I didn't tell you about the iron is that, well, one thing, it's hot, so we don't want to put our hand on it to test how hot. We're just going to trust that it's hot. Okay? The other thing, if you get glue or residue or anything on the surface of your iron, when you're starting to press it down, that's going to transfer to the edge banding. So you need to have a clean iron surface. Now I find that this one tends to be harder to keep straight because as I'm pressing, it wants to move the iron, it wants to move the banding around because the glue gets hot. It wants to push it around. So I want to make sure that once again it's hanging over both edges, a substantial amount, not just 1/8 of an inch. Just like I tell you, if you try to get the exact right amount of wood, you're going to end up making more pieces and more scrap. Same thing with edge banding. Let it hang over the edge. Because as I'm pushing this, you can guess which way the banding is wanting to go. The banding is wanting to go this way, so it's going to pull that. So if I left a small amount, I might find myself at the end and get an exposed edge. Now as I press it on there, you'll notice I'm pressing in a straight line. I'm pressing that way. I don't want to press back and forth like this, because if I do that, it's going to slide and shift the edge banding up and down. And there's not a lot of error margin on there, maybe about 1/8 of an inch on each side at most. So I want to make sure that I'm pressing and just kind of adding a little bit of pressure. Okay? And sometimes you can see a little bit there. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to let that cool off a little bit. Put that aside for now. And I'm going to unplug the iron because I don't want to burn myself when I pick it up. And I'm done with the iron. Okay? A third way that I would maybe apply edge banding, if say for instance you didn't have peel and stick. Fastcap makes just about every wood species imaginable and a lot of different types of laminate, but you might not have it. You might just have a roll of edge banding without glue on it. So now we need to get it to stick to it. So we're going to get something called transfer tape. It's essentially double stick tape, but it is not double stick tape. It is thin. Okay? It calls it transfer tape because it transfers the adhesive from one surface to another. So, if you get double stick tape, it'll be that, oh, I don't have enough on that roll. If you get double stick tape, it's not going to work as well because it's a thick foam usually, and that's going to prevent it from getting a nice flush surface. Now the way I like to do this is the same way with the I do with the peel and stick. I kind of put it on there. This is also pressure sensitive adhesive, and once again I like to give it about 1 inch on each end. This makes it easier to peel it off. Now this side isn't sticky obviously because it's got the backing on it. Since it's pressure sensitive adhesive, I'm going to make sure I activate that by pressing on it. When I get to the edges, I'm very careful about pressing on it because I don't want to bend the tape over, especially when I'm putting the banding on. If I'm pressing down, I could snap the tape over and the banding will break. So we want to be careful when we get to the edges and the corners. Now, I don't have nails, so it's difficult for me to peel paper out. So what I do is I take a slight tear. I just kind of tear into the tape. This is also why I give it an extra inch. And then I give myself a little start here. Oh, this is not going to work for me. There we go. Okay. Now that I got that tape off, let's see here. We'll use the 1 mil banding again. And I'll just get about 1 inch or so. I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's probably too much. But I would rather have too much trimmed off than not enough and I have to redo the piece. Because like I said, the banding's not that expensive. And for your projects, you're only going to need 1 roll. So I peel the paper off. This functions as the peel and stick did. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to press it on one end. I'm going to pull the other end tight. Keeping it as centered as I can. And I press it on there. Now with this, the edge banding, the double stick tape, or the transfer tape, folds over. I'm going to try to pick that up and just stick it to the bottom of the banding. It makes it easier for me to get my flush trims in there to snip it off. So, let's go back to the iron knot. Should be cool enough. I can still feel it's a little warm, but that's alright. I'm going to take my flush trims, I'm going to trim off each end. Once again, that's the 0.5 mil, so you can tell that it snips off pretty easily. You hear the motorcycle in the background. People are observing the quarantine requirements or social distancing, but there is a gentleman who apparently is fixing his motorcycle today, so that's what you're hearing. Okay. I feed it in there, I pull it out, and trim it off. Nothing to it. Nice and easy, nothing coming off the edges. I take my edge brake, and all that does, because this is at a 90-degree angle, it just hits the very corners. So you can see on the paper where I've been rubbing it. And I use this even on the PVC. Even though it really doesn't take a lot of it off, it just helps clean it up and soften the edge a little bit. As you can see, the iron-on works just fine. However, for longer pieces, the iron-on is more temperamental and more difficult to use. Okay, last one, the peel and stick. I'm going to snip that off there. I'm going to snip the other end off, and when I'm doing that, I'm pressing against it, and I'll generally hold the flush against it so that I can clip it off easily. And sometimes I have to go back over it. Now this one, even though it's the 1 mil, it should be a little bit easier to trim rather than the glue, because what happens is that glue gets bumpy on the outside, and I've got to cut through that whole piece. Whereas this, well, maybe not. I've got to get it started. There we go. Once I get it started, it trims off the edges. Okay? And that's the transfer tape one. So I've got a little bit of, I can feel a surface there. So I'm going to take my squeezy blade and just go over it one more time. There's a little bit, that's better. I'm going to take my edge brake and snip that off. Okay. So, to reiterate, there's a couple different ways to apply edge banding relatively easily, smoothly, and efficiently. We have the Festuro edge bander, which is kind of pricey. However, if you're looking to go into the industry, it's one of the better things that you can invest in. As you see, I don't have a very large shop. It's a 3-car garage that I sometimes can use all 3 bays in it. Sometimes I have to move the car out in the morning and set up. But I can do an entire kitchen in here. I don't need much more. I use the edge bander, the table saw, and the panel saw. And of course the chop saw as well to cut things to length. So we have the Festool Conturo edge bander and table. We have the peel and stick from FastCap. We have transfer tape, which you can get from, as you might have guessed, Worth Lewis and Company. That's the place that I find it. I'm sure you can get it elsewhere, maybe Staples or something like that, but it is not the same as double stick tape. So make sure it's transfer tape. But get it from you can get it from Lewis and Company. Go in there and when they have will call back open and you can walk in, you can talk to Sandy or Jose at the back of Soroyan and they'll help you out. They have the iron-on tape, which, like I said, has some limitations. Mainly that it usually only comes in 1 mil thickness or in 0.5 mil thickness, because otherwise the heat would have a hard time getting through all the wood, or PVC, depending how thick it is. The other side of it is that it can be difficult to apply long strips, because as you press that iron on, it's moving that piece across the surface. The tools that you'll need for this sort of thing: we have the iron, we have the heat gun, we have the flush trim snippers. I think these are probably like $15 or something like that from FastCap. Get yourself a pair. Don't use them for anything other than trim and edge banding. If you use this to trim off staples or brad nails or micro pins, you're going to put little indentations on your blades, and you'll be buying another set for your edge banders. You got the FastCap, they call it Fast Break. It does come with a sandpaper. I've had this one for many years. That's you can see it actually broke a little bit. I have to email them, and maybe they'll ship me a new one. They very well made. They're pretty good customer service. But if they ask me to pay for a new one, I'll do that too, because I got a lot of use out of it. You also have the FastCap blade system. I don't know what they call it, but it works out really well. This is probably $15-20 or something like that, and you can buy new blades for it. And so when you decide when these blades just aren't cutting anymore, you can get new ones. I probably should get new blades. You saw how I had to press on cutting through the glue and the thicker edge banding. But that's pretty much all you need to do this sort of thing. Edge banding like this is used for shelving. If you're doing frameless cabinets, you're going to put it around all your plywood edges. If you are adding a frame piece, and you're building out of plywood and the frame's already built, you're going to want to have some sort of banding on there to match whatever the exposed surface is. So it's got many uses. Other than that, I guess this is where I'll sign off. I will show you, and I know a couple classes people they used to always talk about building a very fancy workbench. Now wait till you check out mine. It is constructed from the absolute finest 3/4 inch MDF that you can get. Now, you see that my daughter autographed it for us when she was 7. She's 9 now. So, after 2 years, this is still how it looks. It's on a sawhorse, on 2x4s to prevent it from sagging. And it works just fine. It's easy to put up, take down. Kind of a pain in the butt if you got to keep moving things around. But if you just need a work surface, and don't go out and building some kind of thing out of huge maple and making it weigh like 9,000 pounds. This works just fine. Okay, with that, we will sign off. And I guess I'll see you next time. One of these days, maybe we'll see you in person. Bye now.